Stoicism, though, I wanted to kind of pick your brain about Stoicism because I have this one issue with it.
Okay.
Where maybe we'll kind of finish off fairly soon. But I have this one issue with Stoicism where I feel like you have to suppress your emotions with Stoicism, and I prefer a lifestyle where I accept my emotions. I don't necessarily have to act on all of them all the time, but like I like to accept my emotions and process them and listen to them deeply, because we've been evolving for 5 billion years and they probably have something useful to tell me. But it seems like Stoicism is all like logic and stuff. What do you think about that?
I think that's a common complaint people have about Stoicism. Like that essential just statement you just made is usually what people would say when they have a problem with Stoicism. I think that kind of misses the point of it a lot, because really Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about living in accord with nature, nature with a capital N. And this can mean literal, like in a sense, literal nature, like the outdoors and wild animals and flowers and trees. But it can also mean, nature, just applying it to everything. Like, what is the nature of the broader universe? What is the nature of abstract things like societies? And what is your own personal nature? And so Stoicism teaches that, if you are unhappy with something, and we're talking about like unhappiness, like not like you stubbed your toe and it hurt, but like, the misery of existence, right? If you experience that, I had a bad day today. A lot of that has to come, that comes from unrealistic expectations. Now you take that to an extreme example, right? Where you just had perfect foresight of everything. You'd be able to avoid anything that would cause you a problem. So you know exactly when the car wreck is going to happen, and know how soon or late you needed to pull out of your house so that you wouldn't get caught up in it, for example. And just imagine going through your whole day like that. So to some extent, just because you can't foresee every problem, you have unrealistic expectations, and the pain and misery you encounter is a result of that. So then you think, well, what is the most I can minimize personal tragedy by having realistic expectations, as much as realistic as my finite brain can gather information and understand it and develop good rules of thumb. And so once you get that process started, the kind of calm demeanor that is associated with Stoic philosophers becomes easier to practice. So you think, what is my nature? Like, what are things that set me off, for example? Remove yourself from those situations. You can adopt a rule like that. And then you'll seem like a very calm and together person. And maybe you weren't necessarily like that. Like, so I'm known for having the ability to have a fiery temper, for example. My relatives know about this. Some people who've known me farther back can recall this about me, and they often found it quite humorous, but it is also that same fiery temper that would cause me to post a snarky Facebook status that did not serve me well. And so part of like deleting Facebook not only removed the feed of things that would upset me, but it also stopped me from saying things that would later be used against me. And so as a consequence, there's much less negativity in my life. And as a resting state, I'm a much less unhappy person. When I encounter other tragedies, I can take them much more in stride, because I understood the nature of myself. I understood the nature of my problem. I'm on something like Facebook. It calls itself a friends list, but that is not the nature of Facebook. It is an enemies list. So once I understood that and I adjust my expectations, that was one thing that just reduced a lot of stress from my life. And there are other things I've eliminated. When I go back to saying I've made things a lot simpler, there are problems I don't have because I went back and I looked at things like, where were my expectations unrealistic? Why did this go poorly for me? What could I have done better? And that's when I began to realize the 1% of me that was at fault, even if 99% of the fault belonged to everyone else, whether it's the Republicans, the corporatist Democrats, the progressive Democrats, the 1% I could have done better, could that have actually been decisive? And so apply that to everything, not just politics. And so you'll avoid things that stop stressing you out. And then by being stressed less often, when you encounter inevitable stressors, you're much more psychologically able to deal with them, because you're just not in a constant state of like anger and misery and down in the dumps. And it can take a while of like just consistently doing this before you will not become that improved person overnight. And, you know, if we're talking about like something that is a meaningful solution to the meaning crisis, it's not going to be an instant fix. It's something that steadily compounds like that, like a good investment. And that's where I think people think like they misunderstand Stoicism. Like you instantly go into repressing your emotions. And you don't actually have to repress your emotions, but you'll have much more self-awareness of like, what is the nature of myself? Why am I unhappy about these things? And sometimes your anger can just disappear when you have this meta self-awareness about why you're reacting the way you are. And so it doesn't require you to be like, you know, you're sitting there and you want to say something, you're like fighting the like, you know, cussing that guy out. That's not what a Stoic does. You are in fact not tempted to lash out like that because you've adopted simple strategies that make it easier to do that. And so, you know, and I used to be somebody who would, I would raise my voice and yell when I got angry and stuff, but I got to a point where I felt tempted not to do that. But then I also realized yelling never has served me. I have never yelled at anyone and gotten what I wanted from it. And so I've avoided people and cut people out of my life even that I know that talking with them is going to lead to yelling. And future relationships that I've developed with folks, you know, I make a point never to yell at them. So now the one girlfriend I've had, even though we had some fights, I never yelled at her one time, even when I thought she was completely being ass backwards about something, which confused the fuck out of her because all her ex-boyfriends had yelled at her. And it meant that the conversation did not go in this bitter, toxic way that she usually remembered it with her exes. I would actually sit patiently and just wait for her to say what she wanted to say, which sometimes could take 5 whole minutes before she said anything because she was not very articulate, but also I just think the shock of me like patiently waiting there and letting her say something like gave her the time to think more clearly about it. And when you actually then exercise that kind of self-restraint and you see the reward of it, it doesn't really feel like the next time you do it, it doesn't really feel like you have to fight anything. Or like, oh wait, this is what works. I do want to not like explode into a temper tantrum because I know that doesn't work. I know, in fact, keeping my cool is going to work out so much better for me, or it's significantly more likely to work better for me than dominating him with a shouting match would be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think people, you know, connect those dots when they just sort of, they know about the general idea of the Stoic, the guy who's calm, who doesn't react, who keeps his emotions in check. And it's not like you just flip a switch like, okay, I'm going to stop feeling things now. It's you develop these steps.
Do you feel tempted to yell at people? Ever? Do you ever feel tempted to yell at people?
Not anymore. You know, if I ever do raise my voice, it's not when I'm yelling at people, but maybe like I'm a bit excited and I'm sharing something, you know, or maybe there's a loud bus or something, but it's not like I'm not going to yell at someone because I'm angry at them or because I'm trying to tell them what to do or like, you know, socially dominate them. That is not something that I seek to do anymore.
That's good. It's fascinating. There's I find that although all these different philosophies have different names, a lot of them end up converging on the same points. There's this guy, Kim Bada, who has this shadow course. You have to pay for it, but it's really good actually. And it's shadow is this idea of like we repress things in ourselves and we project them onto others. And so there's this idea of like when you get upset at other people, you're actually upset in like maybe something they have that you want or something that you dislike in yourself, or maybe like something that your mom said to you years ago and like put onto you and now you have to like contend with it or whatever. There's all these different parts. But the first stage of like, I mean, I guess once you start actually understanding shadow, like what you said with where you're yelling at people, like, so at first you're kind of unaware, and then you realize that you're yelling at people and you're getting upset at people. And then the third thing that you do is you remove yourself from the situation. And then after that, you start to like notice, oh, hey, I want to yell at this person. Where is this coming from? And then like, you kind of understand, you begin to understand where your anger is coming from. So like, if I'm really angry, it's because I feel disrespected, and I feel disrespected because I am trying to make a name for myself in this company because I did so badly in school and I want to prove myself, or whatever it is, you know, and like you keep going down.
And that was a similar thing I encountered with some of my frustrations when I would lash out, when I would be unkind to people, was I was in a position in my mid-20s where I felt like I had no control in my life. And part of just what I wanted was have some actual autonomy of my existence. And I was just lashing out, looking for a chance to do so. And, you know, it caused me to be involved in negative behaviors. When I stopped doing that, then I finally got some autonomy over my life. You know, so that's how that works. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, anyone who watches this, they'll understand the basic logic of what I said about the Stoic approach to things. But it will really truly make sense the first time you actually experience one of those moments that I described in your head, when you've actually just lived in and done it for yourself. Because like I said, it's not going to be an instantaneous thing where suddenly everything you can just take it easily. It took a few years of me untangling the mess inside myself to get to be more like I am now. And I suspect it would be true for just about anybody else. And it may even be longer for some folks because maybe their body produces higher levels of adrenaline when they get excited. So they have a lot more, you know, if we're talking about living in accord with nature, that's part of nature as well. It's like, what about your body makes you behave differently? And so, you know, if one person conquers their emotional outbursts in a year, adopting these kinds of habits, and the other person does it in 5 years, well, you know, maybe the person who did it in 1 year was already a pretty mellow dude. So that, you know, the guy who took 5 years shouldn't look at himself as a failure. You know, the nature of his problems, he had a bigger hill to climb, and he should be proud of himself if he eventually climbs it.
Yeah, I think lack of trauma or dealing with our trauma is something that is like a superpower. I've been thinking like, okay, well, in America, we have this wonderful country where if you are intelligent and hardworking, you can get anywhere. But I actually don't. I used to think that, and now I think intelligent, hardworking, and also have dealt with your trauma, because a lot of people, and maybe the trauma gets in the way of being hardworking or whatever, but like, or intelligent, you know, maybe it stops you from being curious or whatever. But I think if you can deal with your trauma, it unlocks so much more of your potential.
Yeah, because I mean, most people who knew me, even if they didn't like me in the Democratic Party, would probably think I was intelligent and hardworking, but I still had friction with them. And because I had my own internal traumas that I hadn't resolved at that point. And after I began to do that, things got better. And I think it kind of goes, so resolving your trauma is kind of hand in hand with another thing, which is, I think, luck. But then you also hear this phrase, you know, successful people make their own luck. And so if Elon Musk sits next to you in an airport, if you're somebody who has not worked out your internal trauma, who is intelligent and hardworking, but you haven't conquered your internal trauma, that's just an interesting conversation. If you're somebody who has conquered your internal trauma, you have the ability to see opportunities now. You're no longer a victim, right? And so, whereas the person who is still a gloomer, sitting next to Elon Musk, oh, this will be a cool story to tell my friends. The person who has conquered their internal trauma and can seize on positive opportunities, suddenly they're next to Elon Musk, right? This could be the moment that their life completely turns around and improves. But that won't happen if they're like, oh, I'm a victim. They'll think, oh, should I tell Elon Musk about this thing? No, he'll just think I'm an idiot, you know. I mean, and that's often the difference between whether somebody continues to live a life and then die a life of mediocrity versus they go on to be an enormous success. And it very well could be the same person if they just had maybe, you know, different balance in chemicals in their brain, regulating their happiness and their sadness. But otherwise, everything else is the same. That could be the difference between what they do at that moment.
You know, yeah, I love that. That was really good. And we say different balances in chemicals, and I was thinking about this the other day. Like, you know, we sometimes say depression is a chemical imbalance, and it's as if to say it's not my fault. It's somehow externalizing the internal, right? It's like, but actually, every single thing in your brain that ever happens, every thought you have is a different balance of chemicals. And just because depression is an imbalance of chemicals doesn't mean you can't rebalance it. And whether it be through medication, but like, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you whether or not to take medication, but like I have dealt with my own issues by exercising a lot. Specifically, exercising helps. Diet helps, but it's really exercise for me. And like, you know, just shaping the way you think, like journaling, stuff like that. So just because, yeah, it's, you can control your own chemical balance.